Hi, everybody. Welcome to our Google Plus Hangout. We are going to be talking today about the upcoming episode of Dateline's My Kid Would Never Do That, and the topic is discrimination. It airs this Sunday. And with us is, I'm one of the producers, Allison Orr, and Lynn Keller is the co-producer. We're co-producers together. And we're joined with Joyanne Reed, who's the managing editor of thegrio.com at NBC, and Chris Pena, the executive editor of NBCLatino.com. And we decided to hi, everybody.
Hello.
Hi. We thought we'd get together and talk a little bit about what it was like to put this broadcast together and what you can look forward to if you can tune in on Sunday. It's part of a series of programs that we've done at Dateline that involve parenting topics that we've done stranger danger, drinking and driving and safe driving. We did an episode on cheating, and this is the final episode in the series, and it's about discrimination. And so Lynn is my co-producer. We worked together on all of these. Lynn, what did you think what was your feeling about this one as a topic?
Well, I think that this one both of us had the most fear about doing it and doing it well because we felt like it was a really important topic. And as we started doing research was like almost a year ago and started talking to people who studied discrimination and race, I think we started learning things right from the beginning. And I remember the very first thing that I thought was so fascinating was I live in a very diverse town and I have 3 small kids, and I always thought, well, I'm not going to talk about, well, this person is African American and this person is Hispanic. I just thought, well, if I don't talk about it, they'll just accept everybody as the same. And the first thing that we learned was it doesn't work like that. Like, you have to talk about differences. And that it's good to be different. It's just that nobody's better because they're different. So that was the first takeaway that I had, and I knew from that moment that we were onto something.
Yeah, because I think that, anytime that something that's such an important parenting tenet that you're a parent and you had no idea about, we were just like, oh,
I was doing it wrong. I was doing it totally wrong.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And as journalists and trying to figure out how we were going to put this together and put it on the air in a way that really could get those things, get the best message through to parents. We looked to some people inside the building here. We have Chris Pena from NBCLatino.com, and I think that we knew right off the bat that one of the areas of discrimination that we wanted to cover was anti-Latino and Latino discrimination. But I think Lynn and I just kind of didn't know where to begin. Like, what did that actually look like? Chris, what did you think when we called you in for a meeting and said, so we have this idea for Dateline. What do you think?
Well, I was happy that you and Lynn reached out because it is definitely an important topic worth having a discussion about. And it was great to be able to offer our viewpoint. And there's so much. You see a growing Latino population in this country, and one out of every 6 people in this country is Latino, and so that's led to certain backlash. And it's a very young segment of the population, and so there's a lot of the lack of understanding around the Latino world and the Latino space, and so I was thrilled to be able to offer our insight about specifically my background and what we see in covering these topics and issues for NBC Latino.
Mm-hmm. I think that Lynn and I really wanted to, it was a good comfort to us to be able to have somebody, here that we could talk to about and say, well, exactly, tell us, how does this discrimination happen, and what's it like in the real world for real kids? Because we wanted the way that, if you haven't seen one of our shows yet, for people watching, the shows are based where kids are in scenarios with actors, and the actors are actively discriminating against someone else who's also an actor. And we wanted to make that as realistic as possible. We didn't want it to be some like fakey PC after school special type thing. We wanted it to be like realistic for kids, and I think that you guys were able to help us with like even what the words to use, who should say them. Lindsay, there was like issues when we were casting actors and how to what the races of the different actors would be.
Right. I mean, even like using something as simple as Latino versus Hispanic.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so I think usually what I say when I get asked that question asked to me is they're interchangeable. But you only know what you know. And so, I agree. It's good to have somebody to go to. And to ask that question that for someone like me is very simple. It's like, you can call me Latino, you can call me Hispanic, or you can call me Dominican. I'm fine with either one. But I know how difficult it is from the other side as well, when you don't know exactly how to treat a subject, and it's delicate.
Yeah.
And I remember you talking a lot about something that I didn't know, about how the Hispanic population or Latino population in America is mostly Mexican, and that we really kind of struggled with, so how do we, do we make that distinction? And I guess we kind of decided that it cuts across the board. I mean, it may be true that most or a big percentage of Latinos in America are Mexican Americans, but we kind of had to, do it for everybody. We couldn't just like specifically pick discrimination against Mexican Americans. Although I think you were the one who told us that people use the word illegal as a verb, or so they were saying, oh no, as a noun.
As a noun.
Yeah, they're an illegal.
Right.
Like, we had never heard that before, or I had never heard it before.
And it's insensitive, and there are a lot of Hispanic advocacy groups out there who come to us in the media and say, please don't use the term illegal immigrant. A person is not an illegal. So we, as a matter of style, use undocumented immigrant. And it's, if we were to describe a person, they lack documents. They are undocumented, but they are not illegal.
Mm-hmm. And Joyanne, when we set out to try to construct what would an African American discrimination scenario look like, we chose the topic of academic discrimination because that really affects kids the most. As a professional and as a parent, what did you think and feel watching the scenario that we came up with?
Well, and you're absolutely right. I think, my husband and I, we have 3 kids, 2 teenagers, a 14, 16, and a 12-year-old. And I think it is true that a lot of times African-American parents get the sense that, particularly with boys, that they're sort of dismissed out of hand their academic abilities until they sort of super perform. People really don't necessarily pay attention to them as much in class unless they're disruptive, or unless it's something negative, or unless they're good at sports. And there is that sort of presumption that, particularly black young men in school, well, they're going to be really good athletes, but they're not necessarily going to be really good at academics. And people have this surprise when African Americans, and adults too, not just kids, are bright, intelligent, well-spoken, etc. So that's something that most black people have experienced and know. So it definitely was interesting to see that played out among the actors in the series.
Mm-hmm. One of the other coaching things that we got when we were trying to select who should be the demographic, or what should be the races of the kids that were actually going to come and be tested, and we wondered, could we have somebody who was a minority, a kid who was a minority, witness racism against another minority? And I remember someone from the Griot saying, oh yeah, because they'll probably not say a word, hoping no one's picking on them. They're going to be so glad that somebody else is getting picked on that they're probably going to be quiet. And I think you noticed that when you watched our hour.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's something, I think when people went into the series, just looking at the kids and the race of the kids who were participating, people would probably presume that African American kids or minority kids would be more sensitive to discrimination, and they are, but I think there are a lot of things people don't understand, and just sort of some of the subtle cost of racism just on the psyche of people, and then particularly among black kids, is that it almost makes them less assertive about racism even when they see it in others, and it just reinforces how important it is for parents to constantly ingrain in children, of all races, that they do need to assert themselves when it comes to issues of discrimination. But yeah, I think that there are some things I think that will surprise people about just the way that minority kids respond to others. Yeah, I think there'll be definitely some surprises.
Chris, did you want to say something on that?
Yeah, well, I've actually had a question for you guys. When you were coming up with the series and the ideas for the series, I mean, you're talking about a very large undertaking. Is there anything that surprised you along the way, and anything specific to this particular hour?
One of the things that I thought was really interesting is that I became aware of how important, what I mentioned earlier, was to talk about people's distinction, that they're races. And so I even said to one of my kids, I was describing somebody, I said, oh, well, he was a black man, and she's 8 years old, and she's like, you can't say that. That's racist. And I had to explain to her, well, no, in fact, that is not racist, and that we do need to, but and even at 8 years old, she has this sensitivity to it, but it's not necessarily put in a positive and effective way to have, better relations between the different races. So that was one of the things that I found fascinating, just being a mom and seeing how it shows up in my own house.
Yeah, I think that Rosalind Wiseman, who's one of the experts in our piece, says it really well and succinctly. She says, if we don't talk about race, our kids just get, it's bad to talk about. And then where does that get us? That it's just bad, and then they can't stand up in the scenarios. I think just one of the things overall that I learned doing this story was actually, well, a little bit how bad I was at predicting what certain kids would do in certain situations. I think Lynn and I thought we knew, but kids just surprised us so much. The kids who were great and stood up and did the right thing in all the situations, whether it was not getting in a car with a drunk driver or not cheating on a quiz. We just were we were pleasantly surprised a lot of the time. Sometimes we were just surprised at our own assumptions. And again, like Lynn said, I've really changed so much of the way that I talk to my kids and plan to talk to my kids about all of these things as they get older. Be specific. That was the big, big, big message.
I was really proud of the parents in this case, and specifically in the discrimination hour. To be able, it takes a lot of courage as well to make that a teachable occasion for their children, and the viewers will see just how important it is to talk about it, and to your point, to not take it for granted.
Well, if I could just say, just speaking to that, I think one of the things that will surprise people too is that I think a lot of times parents assume that they already have ingrained things in their kids that they may not have, and just as everyone's talking about, just by omission and not talking about it and just sort of modeling treating everyone the same. I think a lot of parents assume that that's just going to translate to their kids, and I think a lot of adults assume that kids nowadays don't see race, don't have racist thoughts, don't deal with race, and there's just this presumption that that generation of kids is beyond race. And I think that one of the things that really comes through when you watch the series is that we really are not post-racial. These are issues that our kids are still dealing with, and that as adults, if we just ignore it, it just continues.
Mm-hmm.
There's one student in this particular hour that literally stands up.
Amari.
Physically stands up. Yeah.
He stood up for what he believed in, and that was such an amazing moment during the screening for me.
One of the
what was
things
so cool about him though was that he didn't initially, and it almost seemed like he was going along. He was going to go along with what the group wanted, and to have him physically stand up like that was pretty incredible. I just want to say one other thing about the thing about the parents. Because I know people watching this are probably going to think to themselves, what are these parents thinking putting their kids in this situation? And what we have found is that the parents feel like that they have done a good job teaching their kids these different lessons. And they're willing to find out if they haven't because they want it to be right. So either they got it right or they need to have more work. They're willing to do more work to get it done, and that's why they're there. So I hope that comes across that they are brave parents to do this, but their ultimate motivation is because they care about this topic and they want their kids to grow up with the lessons that perhaps they weren't taught, as kids.
Yeah, and we're so grateful to them because one of the best ways this is one of the things I learned from doing the series is that one of the best ways to teach your kids and talk to your kids is to use really, really specific examples, and particularly like visual things they'll remember and they'll remember seeing. And, without these parents being able to, participate in our story so that we have this sort of record of what happened, like when Amaru stands up. I think that's a thing that a kid will remember. A kid will remember seeing another kid do that. It could be a powerful experience, way more powerful experience than mom saying, now don't forget when you da-da-da-da. Like watching a kid do it right. Like, it sounds like a shameless plug, but the best way to teach is to watch the show with your kids.
Sunday night at
7.
For Chris and Joy, what did you think about the whole issue of peer pressure when you watched The Hour?
I'm glad you mentioned that. That was actually the next thing I was going to say, is that one of the things that is a basic, that not even just in this, but in anything you want to talk about kids, that peer pressure turns out to be so important and so big in terms of kids' responses, because even when people see the special, kids know it's wrong, they'll still go along with the group in order to be accepted. And kids need to be accepted is so powerful that sometimes it can overcome even what they've been taught by their parents, or what their parents think they've taught them, or what they themselves know is the right thing. And there's one kid, I want to give it away, in the special that literally becomes so emotional after realizing what happened and what the truth was, that you can actually see that it's almost physically painful to have done what they see as the wrong thing, but that need to be accepted it's powerful among kids.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and anybody with kids, and we all remember peer pressure growing up. I just had an incident with my 11-year-old daughter, and we had to have an entire discussion around. She knew she was doing the wrong thing, and when I asked her, and I know we've gone through this, every one of us as kids, said, well, why did you do it? Well, because my friend told me to do it. And in this incident, it was something a lot more innocent than what we're talking about, discrimination. But I think the driver of peer pressure plays a significant role for all children.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, it's one of the things that I took away from the special, and I think that parents will take away from it, that it's just as important to teach your kids to be an individual as it is to teach your kids not to discriminate, and maybe even more so, to teach your child to be strong enough to stand alone and stand apart. That's very important.
Mm-hmm. And it's almost one thing I learned throughout this whole series, because peer pressure plays a role in all of them, is that teaching your kids to be assertive in those situations is like an entirely separate thing than teaching them values. You teach them the underlying values, but then they have to know how to act on them in the moment when it counts. And that's really assertiveness and belief in yourself and practice, role playing, just knowing what you believe in and listening to your gut to try to get the word. There's one kid in this show who says, the words were there, they just didn't come out.
The other thing, too, that I noticed that I thought was so fascinating about the peer pressure, and I think that this does happen with discrimination, too, is that initially when the kids, it's a singing contest, and they finish singing and they have their first thoughts about who they thought was best. And then as soon as these plants, these actors who are pretending, that they're just judges, too, start to, say, oh, I don't like this kid because he's Latino, it changes their thoughts. Like, all of a sudden, they're like, oh, yeah, I don't think he was such a good singer. And it's so subtle and so, like, I think they'd have to watch the tape back to believe that they actually were, their mind was completely changed by the power of these two kids, saying, we don't like this kid. Mm-hmm. And I don't think they even noticed it.
And what I love is the actual advice that came from the experts you brought on, and that the experts gave the kids and any kids who watch the special how to push back, because it's difficult for somebody to physically stand up like Amaru and say, that's wrong, I will not stand for that. Most adults don't do that, so how can we expect our children to do that? But there are some really simple, at least to me, it seemed like simple ways to push back to get that message across that any type of discrimination is wrong.
Yeah, so you had some good tips of just like really how to say it and practice saying it. And there's really great tips from Rosalind and from
Yep.
everybody who's in the show about that.
And that whole message of being a good role model, it's throughout the whole series too. It's hard because that's one of the things we heard over and over again. If you want your kids to behave in a certain way, you have to live it. And then also probably when there's a moment when you're living it, if you can point it out to your kids, like, this is what I'm talking about. This is what I'm hoping that you'll be able to do. But, as we all know, it's not easy. Nobody wants to cause trouble or commotion.
Mm-hmm.
It's easier to just sort of let things go. But, if we really want our kids to be that standout, then we have to be it ourselves.
Well, I mean, the other thing, too, I think that's interesting is that the parents that seem to be most successful at getting their kids to do the right thing are also the parents who are the most of a pain. Sometimes it actually works to repeat and repeat and repeat and repeat.
Yeah.
Because you had the instance where the one young man says, I could just hear my mother in my brain.
Yeah.
You definitely want to be a little bit of a nag probably about it.
Yeah, these things are never one-time conversations. So did anybody else have, we're close to our wrap-up time. Anybody have any final thoughts they wanted to say? Chris?
I said, great job by you two and the co-producers in putting this together. And, I think there's a certain amount of bravery and courage that goes into having this discussion. We were talking about it offline, about how difficult a conversation it is. Like, nobody really wants to talk about race, but the reality is we should. And it's something that not only do we confront, but that our children confront. Maybe not every day, but we do throughout our lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Joanne?
Yeah, I definitely would encourage everyone to watch this with their kids. It's definitely something that's important for minority parents and kids to watch too, because I think that we forget that everybody is capable of treating other people differently because of their race, gender, sexual identity, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So this is something that every parent, every family really needs to be on guard for with their kids. And by the way, their kids are already dealing with it, so parents might as well watch and get in the know about what's happening already with their kids.
Mm-hmm.
Really, and it's a chance to open this great dialogue with your kids. And from there, about discrimination, you have other opportunities to share your values and have a really, can be very interesting and enlightening conversation with your children. So I encourage you to watch as well.
And then I will tell you when and where.
Yeah.
It is My Kid Would Never Do That. Sunday Dateline, reported by Natalie Morales. Actually, she's going to be giving a preview tomorrow morning on the Today Show and Sunday on the Today Show, but Sunday night for the full report with Natalie Morales on Dateline, 7 p.m., 6 Central on NBC. And we'll have another Google Plus chat after the broadcast on Monday, noon. And so during the show, you can send an email, tweet questions as to what you're watching, and we're going to reconvene with Natalie on Monday after the show and have another chat. Hangout. Okay. Bye.
Sounds good.
Bye.
Bye.